The cup has been lifted, but there is no shortage of NHL and fantasy news popping off in the hockey world. And that's why you're tapped right into the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Trades, rumors, signings. We got a mixed bag, baby, and we're breaking it all down on today's show.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy hump day, hockey heads. We're back in the booth. It's Flip and Steel and the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We couldn't be here without y'all, and now that the cup is lifted, we are in full gear fantasy draft prep mode. You can never be too early on the scene, Steel, and that's why we have all of the latest covered for you on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Steel, what applies to today's episode, straight heat, because we got injuries, signings, trades, and rumors. A little bit of everything, my friend, but all of it has fantasy impact. We're going to talk about Casey Mittelstadt signing, Jake Walman's trade. The San Jose Sharks are putting together a little bit of an interesting bottom of their lineup, Steel. Nothing's jumping off the page, but we got to dig into these numbers and see if we can find some fantasy gold. And are the Leafs going to overpay Joseph Woll? Let's talk about him a little bit as well. Sounds like he's going to get some money in about 6 days' time, Steel. You know me and the numbers. But over to you right off the top, because there's not too much to talk about here other than we just got to mention it. Sounds like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, we kind of knew Leon was going through something. Busted finger for Leon Draisaitl, as well as a broken rib. And Connor McDavid looking like he's going to need abdominal surgery. I don't think there's too much here to talk about, Steel, but if those two guys are at full health and you even get a goal or two out of Leon instead of 0 in the cup final, that series may have gone a little differently.
Yeah, again, it could have gone differently in the first 3 games where the Edmonton Oilers lost as well. I mean, there could have been some opportunities for them to capitalize on, especially in the Game 7 with Connor McDavid in front of the net. A good stick check from Alexander Barkov, Matthew Tkachuk, I believe it was actually. So a lot of opportunities for the Edmonton Oilers, and there's going to be a lot of injuries that start to come out
for sure.
With every single team. Like we saw it in the first 2 rounds with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning, Boston Bruins, and so on and so forth. So we're going to get some more injury updates from a lot of these teams, especially the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers. Obviously, we've already figured out what's going on with both Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. It'll be interesting to see if the Florida Panthers release a little bit of a injury update list with some of their players, even though
maybe when they sober up after all the
maybe if they, I don't think they've gone to bed, and it's been 2 days now, 3 days. So
I don't know about you, pal, but if we were celebrating the cup, I wouldn't be sleeping for a while.
No, just straight Red Bull. Got to keep it going. Got to keep it going. So, no, it'd be interesting to see what the updated list from both these teams. Obviously, congratulations to the Florida Panthers. A job well done in the Stanley Cup Finals, especially shutting it down in Game 7 with a 2-1 victory. But, yeah, this happens every single postseason. Injuries start to funnel out. You start to hear, last year with Matthew Tkachuk, when he was basically Brady was taking care of him. Like, he was lifting him up and putting his gear on and pretty much making sure he was able to breathe that night because of the sternum injury that he had. So you start to hear these injuries funnel out right after the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to hear.
Not a ton to really cover there, just when there's 2 big names like that. Got to be mentioned, we get you guys in and out in 30 minutes, always trying to bring you all of the latest news from around the league. Both should be back at 100%, and both will be very McDavid obviously number 1 off the board, but after that, Leon could be number 2. Who knows? They're going to be elite once again. San Jose Sharks, though, obviously elite, not exactly a word that gets thrown around a lot with this squad, Steel, but you and I come on here all the time, and when it comes to fantasy, try and put these teams aside for a moment. At times, obviously, elite teams, elite fantasy pieces, a lot more to like about big players on good teams. But Fabian Zetterlund, Logan Couture, The young kid Macklin Celebrini coming in here, Steele. There's obviously going to be some fantasy value to dig into. The Sharks bring in Barclay Goodrow, Ty Dellandrea from the Stars. None of these names jump off the page, but immediately already, Steele, with Walman, Goodrow, Dellandrea, they're bringing in Celebrini, obviously. This team is going to be a little bit better, and Mike Greer knows what he's doing. So they bring in Jake Walman. You and I had talked a lot about this player last year. 12 goals, 9 assists. He kind of teetered off a little bit at times last year, had a good start. Lot to like about this player, though, Steele. $3.4 million for 2 years. He's going to be with the Sharks for at least a couple. He is going to get a lot of ice time in San Jose, and I'm curious to hear what you think this is going to do for his fantasy value.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting season for the San Jose Sharks because, all of those players you just mentioned, but they also, alongside Macklin Celebrini, who's going to be the consensus number 1 overall pick in the draft coming up. Will Smith is going to be in the lineup from last year's draft. Sure. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Quinton Musty as well. I would love to see him in the San Jose Sharks uniform and see what this young stud and young prospect can bring to the NHL level as well. He's going to be a terrific winger in the top 6 group for many, many years to come. Again,
William Eklund is sneaky too as well.
Yeah, William Eklund was very sneaky last year. Will Smith, who's coming in this year as a third-line centerman, just as of what it says on Daily Faceoff right now. I was fairly disappointed with the fantasy value and fantasy season of Jake Walman last year. It was a defenseman that I talked a lot about, especially getting that opportunity with the Detroit Red Wings and what he could bring to the table. Obviously, he missed 20 games. He was injured quite a bit last year, but even when he was in the lineup, there were times where he was dominating on the blue line, where he would chip in with a couple of goals and some hits and some blocks and shots on net, and then he would just go cold for 10 to 15 game periods. And that was what really hit me the most, was the cold streaks that Jake Walman was going on, and the inconsistencies of his game. So, definitely, like you said, 21 points in 63 games. He had 44 penalty minutes, just over 105 shots, 151 blocks, and 42 hits. I still believe that he can do a lot more fantasy value-wise, but honestly, after the disappointing season that he had last year, really getting that one opportunity with Detroit, getting more ice time than what we've seen him get in the past, the 2 seasons in a row of over 19 and a half minutes of average ice time. It'll be interesting to see where he's deployed and how much he's deployed with the San Jose Sharks. But honestly, even with all these young players, I'm still very high on Logan Couture's fantasy value. I don't know that the San Jose Sharks will be a better team than what we saw last year.
They're going to be bad. They're not
going to be a good team by any means. They slightly better than what we saw last year, but I don't think we'll see 10 game losing streaks anymore. I mean, potentially, but
I'm not here for this take.
I'm not going to throw that out the window, but they'll be better than what we saw last year.
Let me wrap this up right around the break. One more comment on the Sharks because, like I mentioned, William Eklund, obviously there's names here that we're going to have to dig into a little bit more as we see what the training camps look like, as we head closer. None of these names are coming off the board unless it's very, very late in the draft. Macklin Celebrini is a bit different. However, the point holds true. You got to be digging into all of these angles because if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do come draft season. We'll get to Casey Mittelstadt. We'll get to Joe Woll. One more take on these San Jose Sharks, Steele, right after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to fit your number one ride or die. Always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, baby. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit that subscribe button, leave the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel, doing phenomenal things over there for the 24/7 free sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest and hottest stories without all the streaming from Fox Sports or ESPN. Locked On Sports brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7. Like I said, you can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it, showing us all that love through the offseason. Of course, we're getting into the NHL awards this weekend. We're getting into the draft Friday, Saturday, and free agency is going to be kicking off Monday, and it's going to be absolutely electric. We're already seeing a few signings. We're going to talk about the Casey Mittelstadt signing. We're going to talk about the potential signing of Joseph Woll, but continuing the conversation, though, of this trade to the San Jose Sharks. Jake Walman, any more comments on the trade for Jake Walman and the San Jose Sharks going into the season?
All I got to say about the San Jose Sharks is we're obviously trying to shine a positive light on this situation. There's only so much poop you can scrub off a turd, Steele. A friend of mine told me that one time. 326 goals against last year was almost 30 more than the next closest team, and that's the Columbus Blue Jackets. So Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek are in for another long season, but there's some intriguing fantasy angles to be dug into. Let's move on. Casey Mittelstadt, definitely a much more appealing player. 57 points in 80 games last year, and I think what makes me the most attracted to this player, aside from that he's only 25 years old and just entering his prime, Steele, is where he is playing up the middle in the top 6 with the Colorado Avalanche. Just by association, if he's getting any looks with Mikko Rantanen at all, or Nathan McKinnon on a power play unit, or they shift Rantanen down at times to play on his wing with Mittelstadt, there is a lot to like about what's going to be in store for this player, I think, Steele. Anyway, you can tell me what you think, obviously, in a second. You don't draft this player for peripheral categories. He doesn't throw the body. He doesn't block shots. But I think offensively, he's a sneaky 65 to 70 point potential player. Maybe in a good year, maybe he breaks out this year a little bit higher. 59 points a couple of years ago, 57 points last season, 57 points total is, I think at the lower end of what I expect from Mittelstadt this season upcoming. Now settled into a lineup he looked very comfortable in, Steele. His offensive upside combined with all of the Colorado Avalanche juggernaut, Cale Makar on the back end, obviously. This is a player I know you like, I definitely like, and now that he's got a 3-year deal in tow, he can really settle in with this Colorado Avalanche team in this upcoming season.
Yeah, this is the first time in his career back-to-back seasons where he's put up 55-plus points. Like you said, 57 last year and 59 the year prior to that. Other than that, he's always been a 22 to 25-point player. Type of player per season
too.
Yeah, dealt with some injuries. It'll be interesting to see what his deployment is like and how much ice time he's getting in Colorado, because in that short stint, the 18 games in the regular season, he was getting under 16 minutes of average ice time. And again, still great production in the offensive zone, 10 points in 18 games. That's really incredible.
He was good in the playoffs too. I think he had 9 points in 11 games.
Yeah, no, he's very good in the playoffs. Just talking about regular season, again, the deployment under 16 minutes of average ice time. So it'll be interesting to see how much ice time he actually gets still playing in that top 6, because we've seen players play in the top 6. Like, we've seen Matthew Nyes right now, and I'm not trying to compare Matthew Nyes to Casey Mittelstadt, but we see him play with Austin Matthews and William Nylander in the top 6 group, but he still only gets 14, 15 minutes of average ice time.
True.
And he only, finished with 25, 30 points last year. So, again, not comparing them, but again, if Casey Mittelstadt can get more ice time, that would boost his peripheral stats as well, because like you said, you're not drafting this guy for the peripheral stats right now. 127 shots last year, 31 blocks and 25 hits. Again, nothing really jumps off the page besides of what the offensive side and the offensive potential of what he brings. I think you're a little high with the 70 points. As of right now. I understand playing with Nathan McKinnon. He's going to be centering that second line, so he probably won't even be playing with McKinnon. More likely Rantanen, like you said. But even then, I think if he can get to 65 points, that's where I have him at. Again, that's not far off 70, but I have him around 65 points on the higher end.
Hey, I don't hate it. 8th overall draft pick, 2017, obviously has that kind of caliber. these are all these things. You and I are speculating on deployments, and it's not even July 1 yet. What will some of these teams do come the July 1st window? Line rushes in training camp. We're not even close to that yet. And all of those things Steele and I will have covered for you. Don't you worry. But when you look at things just kind of news popping off, we got to start speculating. That's what the fantasy game is about, pal. And when it comes to his opportunity on the power play, that deployment will also be key, because when I looked into these numbers for the Colorado Avalanche, and I'm struggling for this tab now, they were the 5th best power play last year. So obviously power play points, opportunity with the man advantage are also angles that we got to dig into and cover. However, Mittelstadt, going to be intriguing. Colorado, definitely going to be in the mix in the Western Conference again next year. That's a playoff team just because of the 3 players in Rantanen, Makar, and McKinnon. Just right there, those 3, that trio is better than 80% of the league's big 3, maybe more. So you know what's coming for the Colorado Avalanche again. Lots of goals. However, Joseph Woll, Steele, we're keeping today short and sweet. Let's talk about the Leafs. Let's talk about Woll right after the break, because I said it last year. The Leafs are at a tipping point. Now, what are they at now? It's going to be interesting. Let's talk about it right after the break.
After the break, and I think they might be past the tipping point at this point. I'm surprised they haven't made any moves as of yet. We're seeing teams sign. We're seeing teams trade so far.
Calm before the storm?
A very quiet Brad Treliving going on as the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs. A little too quiet, in my opinion. We're going to talk about that and more, of course, the Joseph Woll potential signing as well. We're going to get to that right after the break. But this episode is also brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when buying your tickets to your next big event. That's why Flip and I always use the Game Time app. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. And going to a Toronto Blue Jays game has never been easier off the Game Time app, with killer last-minute flash deals, zone deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concert, comedy, and theater events near you. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. Make sure you download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. We're going to try to show some love and support over to the Toronto Maple Leafs right now, and all the rumors and whirlwind that's going on in the Leafs media and Leafs marketplace market right now. Leafs potentially signing Joseph Woll. I believe it is upwards of $4.5 million. Is that what the higher end was?
Kevin Weeks, ESPN, Kevin Weeks reported 3.5 to 4 million is the cap hit he's projecting on a 3-year deal extension for Joseph Woll. What do you think about that number, Steele, first and foremost? If it is 4, let's say it's 4 for 3 years. What are your thoughts on it? Because there are a lot of different takes that I have seen out there, mostly saying that that's an overpay. What are your thoughts?
It is an overpay. And there's no beating around the bush here. It's an overpay. $4 million for a guy who's only played, again, 36 NHL games, a guy who's been injured the last season and significant time as well taken out of his career. Again, a guy who's been injured not just on the NHL level now, but also in the AHL level. Just a player who struggled. And we know what his potential is. We know what he's capable of. We saw it when he came in relief of Ilya Samsonov 2 postseasons ago against the Florida Panthers. We saw it again this season as well in the postseason. We know what he's capable of. Obviously struggled with injuries. The save percentage and the goals against average was the highest and lowest it's been throughout his career this past season, because he played the most amount of games, 25 games. He had a .907 save percentage and a 2.97 goals against 2.94 goals against average.
Yeah.
Look, You and I both agree that there's a lot to love about this player, and you specifically, I believe you traded for him in your fantasy keeper league,
Yes,
and I still think it's a great trade that you made for him.
Yeah.
There's a lot to worry about with the injuries from this player right now. That's why I'm saying $4 million is overpaid because of the lack of experience at the NHL level, staying healthy. And again, the injuries that he's suffered over the last 2 to 3 seasons, not just in the NHL, but also the AHL with the Toronto Marlies.
Yes.
$4 million is too high for me. He is on his last year of his entry level deal, I believe.
He is. He's making just over 770 something grand.
$766,000, just over that. So he is on the last deal. It's not like the biggest rush to get this done. Obviously, I would like to get him signed, but I think honestly, 2.5 is where I'm looking at. 2.5 for 2 or 3 years. Again, maybe a 2-year deal for 2.5. See what he can actually do if he can stay healthy, and then you can start thinking about the longer term and higher AAV.
Yeah, I'm invested into this player. Actually, the trade that I made in my Keeper Dynasty League was I traded John Tavares, and I think it was like the 14th overall pick in our 16-team league for Drew Doughty and the 6th overall pick. So I moved up the board to take Woll in the first round because goalies are so thin still in a 16-team league. It's almost impossible to get 2 good starters, let alone 3. So I just kind of took a shot on Woll. And look, the Leafs are looking to be doing that themselves. And this is feeling like almost like your hand is forced because of how thin the goaltending options are out there, because Joseph Woll can play. He is a cerebral-like goalie that doesn't seem to be he is unflappable. I like to say that. He comes in big moments, and he's looked calm. He was good also in this postseason, and what happened again? He got hurt, and he wasn't there. And that obviously is the main talking point, the main thing everyone's covering, and the obvious concern. And when I read into these injuries, Steele, the joint sprain in his back. And I don't do this often about reading up on the actual medical side of things, but when I'm as deeply invested into that league and to this player that I am, this joint sprain in his back is a very tough one to fully recover from. You just kind of deal with it and hope it comes from the over twisting of the pelvis. And I don't know about you, but the last time I watched someone play goalie in the NHL, a lot of pelvis twisting. So this is a concern. 25 years old, and Brad Treliving said this week: I've got faith in Joe. Quote, the biggest question with him is he's gotten injured too much, and we have to dig into that. If I were them, I would be digging into it very quickly, because if Joseph Woll once again next season isn't able to go for prolonged stretches, Steele, I don't think there's going to be this lucky Martin Jones character to come in and get kind of some wins here and there. The Leafs have nothing in the cage. 2 UFAs in Samsonov and Martin Jones. I don't know what the future holds for Treliving, but he better get to those phones, because he is going to be a busy boy over the next couple of weeks as this Toronto Maple Leafs team figures it out, or tries to.
And clearly they're in the goalie market. I mean, they've been in the goalie market for the last few seasons. Yeah, a lot of teams are in the goalie market. So, yeah, you've got Ilya Samsonov as a UFA. You've got Martin Jones as a UFA. You've got Matt Murray on the IR still. So, again, do you want to...
Those are a lot of names that I don't want to hear on our team,
do you want to re-sign Matt Murray potentially to a lower deal just to see what he's capable of? I think they're moving on from Martin Jones, obviously. I think they're moving on from Ilya Samsonov, because I think Sammy's going to be looking for a little bit too much that the Maple Leafs can't afford to pay him. And that's why, again, $4 million for Joseph Woll is a little bit of an overpayment. I think 2.5, maybe $3 million for 2 years is where I'm looking at. Matt Murray, maybe if he's capable of signing a $3 million deal or a $2 million deal as well. I mean, I wouldn't hate it just because it keeps the restraints of the salary cap a little bit better for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But look, I would rather go on to the free market there and see what goalie they can sign in free agency starting Monday.
For me, and I know some of these moves are not exactly fantasy relevant, but I would love to bring back Connor Dewar as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Yes. I like his grit. I like the way he skates. I think he has a lot of upside. I say bring back Connor Dewar. I would also like to bring back, if I have to choose over Bertuzzi or Domi, I know who I'm choosing. I want to bring back Max Domi. And then I'm looking down at the blue line. Maybe try and bring back Joel Edmondson on a good deal. He's only 30 years old. He's a big boy who makes it difficult for teams to play in front of the net. Those are the three that were with the team at the end of last season that immediately jump off the page for players that I would like to see them bring back. Joseph Woll signing. It's going to happen. Is it going to be $4 million? I hope not.
Hopefully not.
However, let me leave it at this, and then I'm going to stop talking. Joseph Woll, if healthy, is a very relevant fantasy piece on a team that, say what you will about the Leafs, they are still going to get wins, and they are still going to be very much in the mix as a playoff team in the Atlantic Division. And that means whatever goalie is in there getting them wins is going to be someone you want to look at. Joseph Woll, for me, still brings a lot of intrigue, but let's see what happens. Again, I need to see what happens in training camps. How are they looking after the summer? You and I are looking at this early, and we'll dive into it all summer long.
That is a big if Joseph Woll can stay healthy moving forward. But lots of hockey over the next week. The NHL awards take place on Thursday. The NHL draft takes place Friday and Saturday. And then you've got the free agency hitting up Monday, July 1st. Absolutely can't wait. It's going to be a chaotic Monday. We absolutely love free agency here on the Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Again, make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Day. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Go check them out as well on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with your summer bets in the MLB, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.